I cannot stop thinking about challengers. The film has set up a little umpire's chair and a net in my brain and watches as I volley between my everyday thoughts and thoughts of the film. And judging from what I've been seeing on the internet, it's done the same to you. So let's talk about it. Welcome back to Illiteracy. My name is Ellen, and I, along with what appears to be the rest of the internet, have fallen in love, or maybe more accurately, fallen in lust with challengers. Luca Guadagnino's latest film starring Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Feist as three tennis players who play games on and off the court. And Challengers is the film of the summer, because if there is one thing that Luca Guadagnino excels at, it is shooting hot people in beautiful sunny places. Challengers is hot, sweaty, colorful, kinetic, tactile, tense, and so sexy. But it's not just a feast for the senses, because like any good hookup, it lures you in with the promise of a good time, and then it leaves you wanting more. And nobody was more surprised than I to find that the scenes that I was turning over, the aspects of the film that I couldn't stop thinking about, weren't just the hotel room scenes. Ever since I saw the film, and then I saw it again, and then one more time on top of that.
So I remember sitting in the back row. I went 4 times. I was in college, and just sort of making a bit of a wish and a prayer that one day I might get to do something like this. So it's very meaningful to me.
I found myself thinking about the characters, the relationships, the symbolism, tennis, so I need to talk about it. I need to maybe put my film degree to good use and dissect it. So we'll be looking at the love triangle, the character psychologies, sex, tennis, homoeroticism, and what stylistic elements of the film either convey or reinforce these themes. So join me, if you will, in donning a metaphorical, imaginary, critical thinking tennis headband for the rest of this video. I'm not gonna give a summary of the film here because we can't be wasting precious time. There's gonna be spoilers, and I'm gonna operate on the assumption that you have seen the film. Feel free to, pull up the Wikipedia page, skim the plot, refresh your brain, and while you're pulling that up, just to let you know, I will be donating the AdSense from this video to on-the-ground charities working in Palestine. My last video, which was on Israel and Palestine, the Met Gala, etc., was demonetized, and in that video I talked about how I would be donating the AdSense to Creators for Palestine. With that and this video, I'll be donating it to on-the-ground charities in Palestine because Creators for Palestine campaign has ended. But thank you to everyone who watched the last video, who supported it, who was commenting algorithm for the algorithm. If you're interested in donating yourself to any of the charities, I'll have a list in the description. But if you're not in the position to donate, you can always turn off the ad block, refresh the page, watch the ad. So that will help bump up the ad revenue so I'll have more money to donate, if that makes sense. I'll be keeping you updated either in the community tab or my Instagram. And unfortunately, because of my recent demonetization, I can't thirst as openly over challengers as I would like to because YouTube censors are keeping a very close eye on me. But maybe that's a good thing, because the second time I saw challengers in the cinema, my friend Rebecca here in Seoul, it was in an empty cinema, and we went a bit feral. We can't talk about challengers without talking about the love triangle. And there's a reason that it became known in popular consciousness as the Zendaya threesome film. People really jumped on this moment when the trailer came out, for good reason. But the film can't be reduced to the simplistic notion of a love triangle film, because the love triangle is anything but simple. In other words, the love triangle in Challengers, she's not like the other love triangles. She's kind of different. If you're around my age, which is 26, in case you're wondering, you probably grew up with the love triangle trope being shoved down your throat with every TV show, every film series, every book series. But most of the time, these relationship dynamics weren't a triangle. They were more of a V, more of a love angle, if you will, with the main character kind of torn between two love interests. To think of some examples off the cuff, we had a vampire and a werewolf fight over an awkward brunette girl, A vampire and his vampire brother fight over awkward brunette girl. A rum-soaked pirate and Orlando Bloom fight over awkward brunette girl. A baker and a war criminal fight over awkward brunette girl. You get it. You get it. In rare instances, we've seen homoerotic or homosexual relationships kind of mediated through a third party in a love triangle. Elio, Oliver, Marcia in Call Me By Your Name, Basil, Dorian, and Sybil in The Portrait of Dorian Gray, Elle, Vivian in Legally Blonde, Michael Collins, Harry Boland, and Kitty in the Irish historical film Michael Collins. The last one might be a bit of a deep cut, but Challengers doesn't fit with either of those dynamics. Both the screenwriter, Justin Kritzkis, and the director, Luca Guadagnino, have said in interviews how they wanted all the sides of the triangle to be touching. And touch they do. But Patrick, Art, and Tashi's love triangle isn't just a matter of them all wanting to bone each other. They all need each other to make up for the traits that they lack in themselves. Zendaya went as far as to call Challengers like codependency the movie, with all the characters searching for something out of life that they can only get from each other. They can't exist without one another. Like, take one side out of the triangle and just it collapses like a house of cards. And this gravitational pull that they have towards each other, whether it be sexual, emotional, or professional, is the core of the film. It's the main draw. But none of the characters are perfect for each other. We're not encouraged to root for any one character or any one relationship. And that's what I think makes the film so interesting. I've seen a lot of discourse online about the villain of the film.
You'll have an opinion, and then you watch it again, and I guarantee that opinion will change. Every time I watch it, like I said, I was like, oh, Tashi, what are you doing? And then the next thing I'm like, actually, she didn't do anything wrong, and it was art all along, and then I'm like, actually, Patrick should have never said that. So every time I'm angry at a different character, or I feel more passionate about a different character, I feel heartbroken for, like, it's just, it constantly changes. So I say don't judge, because I feel like your opinions will change.
But I don't think any of the characters are villains. Like, instead of fitting into character tropes, I feel like the characters feel like real people. I found my own feelings about them while watching it echoed in interviews with Kritzkis. Quote, "I don't think about characters as being villains," he says. "You're trying to create people that feel real, and what that ends up meaning is that you create people who are as cruel and petty and kind and understanding and generous and mean as the people you meet in real life." I've also seen complaints that the film is poorly written, that the characters are kind of underdeveloped with no clear motivations or like interiorities. But I think that this is intentional, because the film doesn't tie up the story in a neat bow at all. It leaves a lot of questions unanswered. How did Art get injured? Was Patrick actually cheating on Tashi when he was on tour? Why were Patrick and Art's beds already pushed together when Tashi came over? And most of all, who won the tennis match? There are a lot of gaps in the story, but it feels like a screenplay that respects the audience. It's not like holding your hand and telling the audience how to feel at any point in the film. It's just kind of letting these events unfold with kind of morally gray characters and ambiguous backstories. It lets you make up your own mind about everything, which I guess is why it's so interesting to see the diversity of like interpretations and discourse around like the characters in the film and everything. And I get what people are saying when they say that they feel like maybe the characters are underdeveloped, or maybe they feel like they don't truly know them, that they don't really get a sense of like their inner worlds. But again, I feel like this is intentional, because I don't think we're meant to know that much about the characters' like psychologies, like what they're thinking, what drives them, what they truly desire, because it indicates like how they repress their own emotions and how they hide from one another. And this repression also comes back to the kind of importance of tennis in the film, because we know how symbolic tennis is in the film, obviously from the dialogue to the sex scenes, which we will touch on in a minute.
What's your problem? You always think you won before the match is over.
Were you talking about tennis?
We're always talking about tennis.
Can we not?
And one of Kritzky's motivations to use tennis as a backdrop for this relationship kind of dynamic exploration was because of the intimate and erotic yet like repressed nature of the sport. And it's one of the only non-combat sports that is played one-on-one. Kritsky said in a Variety interview, "Tennis, by its nature, is a very erotic sport. It's sort of the opposite of boxing, where you're all alone and you're trying to spend the whole match touching another person. Tennis is about being all alone and being at a distance from somebody and trying not to touch them, trying to just miss them and trying to trick them, trying to make them think the ball is going to go one place and then go another place. There's a deep intimacy and a deep eroticism in that, and also a lot of repression. It's a very repressed sport because, again, the point is no contact. The point is to just miss the other person. To me, that's almost like a Victorian romance. It's very sexy. So tennis, of its nature, is erotic, and you usually play tennis against somebody of the same gender, so tennis, by its nature, then becomes almost homoerotic. Yeah, it does. In tennis, outbursts of emotion are punished. Whether it's smashing a racket or shouting and obscenity, players are threatened with point penalties that force them to keep their calm, keep their composure to the best of their ability.
Competition, warning, record abuse.
Most of the time, the only sounds that emerge from them are these guttural shouts, grunts, groans that I'm sure we're all familiar with. And the sport is both physical and psychological, descriptors that could also be applied to the relationships of challengers. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about the kind of lack of clear interiorities, but each character leaves their kind of desires, their opinions, their discontents unspoken. And Tashi is probably the one who does this the most. So let's talk about Tashi is different from the other two characters in the left triangle, and not just because of the obvious elements of like her race and gender, but because of her relationship to tennis. Side note, if you'd like an excellent discussion of race and tennis and like Tashi's relationship to both, Princess Weeks did an excellent video on that, which will be linked in the description. It's made pretty clear to us early on that Patrick and Art both come from wealthy backgrounds. Patrick especially. Tashi does not.
And what does your parents' place look like? Exactly.
Not like this.
No, it's bigger.
No. I mean, yeah.
High school? No, we couldn't afford it. And even if I could get a scholarship or something, there's no way that my parents would want me coming of age in an environment like that.
Besides tennis, Tashi doesn't have an alternative. She doesn't have a plan B. There's no seat on the board of her parents' company. Tashi doesn't have the luxury of treating tennis as anything but a life raft. For Tashi, tennis is a way to get a better life for her and her family, but she also recognizes the importance of her success in tennis beyond that. As a role model, as an icon, as a successful Black woman in sport. She came of age in the early 2000s, so she witnessed the Williams sisters' success, but she also saw the backlash against them that came with their success, the racism and the classism that they have been subjected to over and over again.
The whole stadium was 99% white people, and they were all booing.
Yeah, I got angry on the court. So did McEnroe, so did all these other players.
One slip up and it's just like, oh, she's, crazy or whatever.
Even when my sister was playing, I could tell when she would win points and when she would lose, because the crowd would be really loud if she lost the point. And then there would be almost silence if she won. I had to make people realize that, it's okay to be Black and to play tennis, and it's okay to be good at it and to be better. And that's kind of something I had to lean into myself and realize that it wasn't me. It wasn't anything to do with me. It was just that I had to force people to see me because of my game and let my game do the speaking.
But equally, the barriers that they broke down in terms of sport, in terms of representation. And Kritsky said that Tashi was always written to be a Black woman, that you couldn't write a story of contemporary tennis without Black women. And Zendaya spoke to the singularity of Tashi in an interview with Variety. Patrick and Art will never be what she could have been. She would have represented something bigger, and she'll never know what that looks like. Once she gets injured, we see kind of one break in her cool, calm, collected facade where she sits down against a tree and she cries and she mourns what could have been. But like she always does, she gets up, pulls herself together, and soldiers on.
I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm okay.
Takes care not to let her facade fall again, quickly pushing down any emotions that threaten to bubble up. She only lets that grief come out for a brief instant before repressing it and instead staying as close to tennis as she possibly can, which is through coaching and then through art. And she controls everything. She manages brand deals, she takes care of their daughter Lily, and obviously she coaches Art. And throughout the course of this, she can be manipulative and selfish. She's clinging to the power that she got from tennis, very much leaving deep claw marks in that, refusing to let go. And she knows that when Art retires, she'll be forced to face those emotions and finally grieve. And even though she volleys between Patrick and Art, we know what her true motivation is because she tells us at the start of the film.
But what do you want?
I want to watch some good tennis.
So she pushes Art, she pushes Patrick, and it gives her a sense of power, control, and agency that has been taken from her. But even after her injury and her early retirement, Patrick and Art still give her this power. So if they're putting her on a pedestal, can we really blame her for stepping up onto it? I did see some reviews say that they thought that Tashi was a poorly written character, a female character that has no psychology. She's only there to serve men. But I think that her lack of emotional expression isn't a flaw in the writing, it's a flaw in Tashi herself. And it's interesting because the characters in the original script are actually much more expressive. At one point during Patrick and Art's match, she's described as Tashi now has her head in her hands as Art appears to have fully given up in the first set. And the Tashi that we see in the film is obviously much more subdued, and I actually found a few instances like that where there were kind of explicit exposition cut, but I think it's because the talent of Josh O'Connor, of Zendaya, and of Mike Feist is like high enough that they're able to convey like all these subtle nuances without kind of having to rely on stuff that's written on the page for them. In this Refinery 29 article, Zendaya is quoted as saying, "I'd never seen a character like her be portrayed, and especially not from someone like me. Often these kinds of characters need to be likable or demure or apologize for their behavior or be in service to a leading male character to get emotionally to where they need to go. That is literally the only purpose of the female character, especially Black female character." And some people do read Tashi exactly like this, as a vehicle or a proxy for which the two men, Patrick and Art, enact their desires for one another. And though this notion of transferred attraction, transferred desire is definitely true to some extent, the love/tension definitely like travels in all directions, and Tashi is very much the center of it. And the film style very much reinforces this. She's centered in the frame, she's centered in the men's lives, she's seated in the middle of the court, she leans back to watch them kiss. She's always the head of the triangle. But, like I said, all the sides of the triangle touch. So, speaking of, Patrick and Art, fire and ice. As foils to one another, I think that analysis by comparison is kind of the best way to see like each of their psychologies. Patrick, my problematic bi king. He is loud, brash, impulsive, and absolutely coasting by on raw talent. He is domineering and he's always invading people's personal space. He's always like jutting into the frame and kind of taking over the shot of other characters. And like his title of Fire, he is destructive. He's short-sighted and impatient. He jumps into pro tournaments without going to college, always avoiding responsibility. He refuses to adapt, to learn technique, and he fosters this kind of persecuted victim complex. He's also the only one of the duo to keep smoking past like adolescence, which I think shows his like flippancy towards tennis. And despite having a wealthy family to fall back on. He chooses to go broke and like skimp food off other people, to sleep in his car, to kind of preserve this narrative of him as an underdog. But like I was saying earlier, like he has the luxury of kind of throwing in the towel and acting careless because his livelihood isn't relying on tennis. There was an interesting part of the screenplay where when Patrick does Art's serve to kind of tell him that he slept with Tashi, like the first time when they're teenagers. In the screenplay, it talks about how angry Art is, not only because he slept with Tashi, but because it shows that Patrick can serve normally, he just refuses to. And then Art, Ice, Mr. Freeze, he is playing the long game. He is planning for the future, biding his time, sowing his seeds of discontent in Tashi and Patrick's relationship. He is a little snake in the grass. But while fire could keep on burning and burning, ice eventually melts. And there's a line I like from the screenplay where Patrick is trying to convince Tashi to coach him. And she says, "My point is that you can actually build something out of ice. Fire just tends to burn shit down." And she's right, but like an ice sculpture at one of Gatsby's parties, or like probably in an episode of My Super Sweet 16, Art's drive dwindles over time. Again, unlike Tashi, he never really had that passion, that like burning desire, because he didn't need tennis. So Art has discipline but lacks passion. Patrick has passion but lacks discipline, and their tennis styles reinforce this kind of reading. The screenplay describes Art's game as beautiful, made up of clean strokes, lots of power from the baseline, a textbook one-handed backhand. Patrick is something else. He's an absolute monster on the court, coming up with unexpected, seemingly impossible, low probability shots, the stuff you can't teach. Art is like Fleabag in the confession booth. He just wants someone to tell him what to do. Patrick does not like when someone tells him what to do. And the boys' attraction to Tashi also betrays their different motivations and their different attitudes. At the Adidas party, Art is staring at the poster of Tashi mid-serve, whereas Patrick is just staring at the beautiful picture of her. Art asks her about her game, he admires her backhand.
Look at that backhand.
It wasn't even like tennis, it was an entirely different game. I actually wanted to ask you about that point earlier.
Don't make fun, man. She's a remarkable young woman.
Meanwhile, Patrick...
I'd let her with a racket.
And on that note, there was a lot of buzz when Challengers came out, and some people heralded it as the rebirth or the revival of the erotic film. Not that kind of erotic film, but you know what I mean. Maybe we were disappointed, maybe we were surprised, I don't know, to find that there weren't actually any sex scenes in the film. There were certainly a lot of sexy scenes, but no sex scenes. The cast, the writer, the director have repeatedly said in interviews that the tennis scenes are the sex scenes.
And actually, for the game of tennis being the actual eroticism at play.
Which makes sense, because remember what Kritsky said about how tennis is a very erotic sport. And he's right. I can't remember if it was a tweet or a letterbox review or what, but I saw something that said everything in Challengers is about sex, except sex. Sex is about tennis. And they're right. And sex in the film is mediated through the language of tennis, sometimes literally. When Patrick and Tashi are making out, they keep stopping to talk about Patrick's game or talk about art. And the minute that they stop talking about tennis and art, all the passion just gets sucked out of the room. There were two scenes in the script where Tashi coached Art in bed when they were getting together and he couldn't get his racket up. I couldn't really think of a tennis metaphor for that. And as Zendaya said to Variety, tennis is their only form of communication. And tennis is embedded in the structure, in the dialogue, the style of the film.
Most of the scenes are duologues, and they are like tennis matches. And you're trying to undercut the other character, and then that character kind of pulls the rug from underneath the other one. You think you're winning a scene, and then Mike does something interesting as art, or Z does something interesting with Tashi, and you're like, shit, I'm on the back foot.
Kritsky saw the psychological, the kind of mental games of tennis and mapped it onto speech. And in the film, they use sex as a psychological game, just like tennis. Tashi uses sex to draw Patrick and Art closer, both to her and to each other. She plays them off each other, ultimately with the goal of watching great tennis. Patrick uses sex as a tool of like manipulation. He tries to charm the motel receptionist. He effectively uses his Tinder date as like an Airbnb, and he really comes in swinging to the sauna trying to intimidate Art before their game. And speaking of Art just really, he doesn't really have that much sexual energy. He has, you know, the discipline, maybe he has technique, but he doesn't have passion. And Guadagnino shoots the tennis scenes sexier and like more intimately than the actual like hookup scenes. When we talk about objectification in cinema, which is normally in the context of the male gaze, like what cinematic codes are used, what kind of camera language is used to eroticize people. A lot of the time we talk about how the body is kind of fractured into parts. The camera is isolated on different parts of the body to build this sense of eroticism, like the legs, the butt, the mouth, eyes, hands, abs. The camera pulls us in close and forces our eyes to linger in intimate places. And the close-ups of like sweat dripping down engorged muscles is confined to the tennis scenes. And what's more, the scenes where the characters kiss are often interrupted by like dialogue or like the sound of glass crashing, or it's overlaid with music. But during the tennis scenes, we hear the grunts, the groans, like guttural shouts through the soundtrack, kind of echoing over the stellar techno music. The homoeroticism, the homosexuality is dripping from these two. I don't even think I need to kind of dissect their body language, the phallic symbolism. I feel like I can probably just let it play out. But there's not just a sexual tension between them, there's an intimacy. Art spits gum into Patrick's hand before he ever does it with Tashi. Patrick taught him how to jerk off, and they're repeatedly consciously or maybe unconsciously mirroring each other's body language. Like Tashi says, tennis is a relationship, and the two of them have played together longer than any of the other characters. And from watching them play, Tashi picks up on these aspects of their relationship. She picks up on the intimacy. And their tennis is better when they're together. Finally, some good fucking tennis. Luca Guadagnino said in this New York Times article that the look of the film is dictated by character. Sometimes when I talk to my production designer and they show me something, I say, that's something that belongs to cinema. We shouldn't do that. We should do something that belongs to the reality we're describing. The lead aspect of cinema must be performance and must be character. If you put your imagery in front of the performers, then the movie becomes kind of stilted and a bit rigid. Color is one instance in which he highlights the differences in character. Patrick and Art are clothed in black and white outfits. Patrick's is dirty, crumpled, old, worn in. Art's is neatly pressed, clean, Uniqlo branded. Also much more conservative than Patrick's little short shorts. They are also contrasted with red and blue, fire and ice at different points in the film, and Tashi often wears the color of like the partner that she's aligned with at any given time. Red and blue is also baked into the set design of the film. There's even like tiny details like Tashi's jewelry mixes warm and cool metals, again the kind of idea of opposites clashing but also kind of working well together. And both Tashi and Art fidget with their wedding rings, which we know isn't just a nervous tic but very much betrays their deeper anxieties about their relationship. And there's one shot that I love where Art is talking to Tashi and he's telling her he wants to retire, and it's a low angle shot. And normally this kind of low angle shot denotes power in a scene. It makes the character seem larger than life. It makes them seem like they're looming over the other character, that they're like dominating the frame. But here, the frame is dominated by Art nervously picking at the skin around his finger, fidgeting with the ring, and any power that he may have is dwarfed by his love for and his obsession for Tashi. The entire look of this film is just absolutely gorgeous. The color is so saturated and bright and summery. It was shot on film, and the cinematography by the cinematographer Sayampu Muktipram is fresh and exciting and kinetic, but it's also like intimate and deeply personal at the same time. It like very literally puts you in each character's perspective with some like direct point of view shots, and yeah, the kind of B-movie slash like video game POV shots in the last 15 minutes might be a little jarring to some, but I was into it. I enjoyed the sense of play. And the cinematography, the editing, the soundtrack all blend together to like keep this sense of constant momentum. And that's something that I noted after seeing the film for the first time, was that I just loved the rhythm of it. And it's not only like satisfying to watch, but it succeeded in building tension throughout. And the soundtrack by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
As I recall, we received an email saying, "My next movie is called Challengers. It's super sexy." All capitals with 3 X's. So what could we say? We said we're in.
It has been my top listen on Spotify since it came out, and it will probably definitely be my top listen of like the year. It will continue to form the sonic backdrop for my everyday life. They previously made one of my favorite like music pieces, which was In Motion from The Social Network.
It's on.
And In Motion was one of the first like kind of like techno-y tracks that I heard, and my ADHD brain, even when I was 12 and I was yet to be diagnosed for another 13 years, really just latched onto it and was like, this is so satisfying to my brain and I don't know why. And I would listen to it on repeat, and then to this day, I still will go onto YouTube and I'll find the 30-minute loop and I will just listen to it on repeat while I work, while I exercise, while I read. And I've been yearning for more music like that. So I cannot stress the amount of love, the amount of joy that I get from the Challenger soundtrack. It also has like single-handedly gotten me into exercising, which is not something that I would have foreseen for myself. But I like put the soundtrack on and I'm like, I gotta move. I have so much like energy. I feel like that is everything that I can like coherently say about this film. I definitely have like other thoughts bouncing around in my head, but they don't make much sense. Like I was really, really overthinking this film. And at one point in my notes, I wrote like, you can't spell Patrick without art. And at that point, I had to put the pen down and kind of close the Hello Kitty notebook. Because I was like, we're getting too cerebral. But at the same time, I'm like, it's true. Can't spell Patrick without art. Well, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Challengers. Yeah, I think that is everything that I can say like that is in any like structured way. Oh, I wanted to show you actually. How do I do this without messing up the whole setup? If you don't know, if you don't follow me on Instagram, I'm currently in Seoul, South Korea. I'm here for a couple more weeks. I've been here for like 2 months, but I'm in an Airbnb, and the bedding, it's kind of tennis themed. You know, it kind of feels like a tennis court. I think maybe I just have Challenger's brain rot, to be honest. And I did initially plan on going to like a tennis court and filming there, but it is like 31 degrees outside and it's so humid, so I couldn't do it. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next video. What was I listening right before I filmed to amp myself up? Always, always. Thank you. Goodbye.